gospel of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, according to the word.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
And there will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and on the earth distress of nations and perplexity, because of the roaring of the sea and the waves, people fainting with fear and with foreboding of what is coming on the world. For the powers of heaven will be shaken, and they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now when these things begin to take place, straighten up and raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. And he told them this parable. Look at the fig trees and all the trees. As soon as they come out in leaf, you see for yourselves and know that the summer is already near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that the kingdom of heaven is near. Truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all has taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Please be seated, folks. The 16th of December was the birthday of a gentleman named Lyle Buck. Lyle Buck woke up that morning and he stood on top of a hilltop surrounded by trees and looked down on a little village down below as the sun was coming up on a crisp winter day. He looked down and he saw two men walking house to house kind of down the middle of the street. And as he followed the street up with his eyes, a vehicle was driving down the road at alarmingly high speed. It was an old-style Jeep, and it was going very fast. And as it came into the town, it stopped. The two men that were in the Jeep talked to the two men that were on the ground, and then the two men got in the Jeep, and the Jeep started coming up the hill. Well, the Jeep belonged to Lyle Buck. It was part of his group of men that were on top of this hill. The year is 1944. We are in the Ardennes forest of Belgium. And when the Jeep got to the top of the hill, a man got out and ran up to Lyle and spoke to him as such. Sir, there's a lot of German soldiers coming this way now. Lyle Buck was the platoon leader, a young 21-year-old platoon leader for 40 men on top of this hill. It was a reconnaissance platoon that was put there to kind of look out what's going on, make sure that everything's safe for the division behind him. And he received this word. All he could do was simply get on the radio real quick and say, "Hey, we've got a problem." It wasn't Houston, but it was like, "Hey, division, we have a problem." What transpired after that, within minutes after that, was three battalions of SS armor and infantry came out of the basic woods in front of this town and advanced on Lyle Buck's position. Again, there were 40 men. 40. It actually took 8 hours for the Germans to dislodge Lyle Buck from the top of the hill. So you can imagine Lyle and his men were doing the good old, we're holding their ground. They finally had to surrender when they ran out of ammunition. They just had nothing left to fight. And back in those days, they were taken prisoner. And the German commander actually, when he found out, questioning Lyle Buck, it was his birthday, he did wish him happy birthday and said, "So you become a man today."
Yeah.
Yes, he did. Very much so. I was able to actually be on this hill back in I want to say 2000. I was able to go to this site, and that's why I know the story. And it was a tour, and we actually stood in what was left of the foxholes. They came up to about here when you stood in them because they were just filled in with like leaves and brush from the trees over the years. And as they told the story, you're standing there going, "Wow, this is where all this had 3 battalions, and these 40 guys just conquered in these trees on this hill, held out." The amazing part is that when I returned to this site later with other soldiers to give them my version of the tour, not just tour, but it was actually a chaplain's trip to teach these soldiers these values that these World War II guys held and to kind of get them motivated, right? To get them inspired on, wow, I can do this too. I'm only 18, and you mean I could hold a hill? You know, well, yes, you could. On one of the trips, my group is pulling up and they're getting out. And up on the hill itself, as we're walking up, there's a bunch of people up there. And there's all these old guys up there. And the tour guide I knew, I said, hey, what's going on? He said, we are bringing survivors back to these places. And I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. You know, they want to revisit the battlefield. He said, well, it's more than just revisiting the battlefield. He said, you don't understand. When they were here the first time in the war, all they knew was what was going on the hill or in their little section. They had no clue what was going on big picture. And that's critical there. They had no idea what was going on big picture. Because these were just guys who were like, go here, go there, fight here, fight there, defend here. And that's what they did. And they would be moved at night sometimes, or they would be running for their lives sometimes, or they would just be, full of adrenaline attacking forward. And they had no clue what was going on the left or the right. They simply just saluted and said, yes, sir, and executed. So this was their opportunity to come back and see the big picture of things. What really happened on that day? And it was a really neat experience. And everything was laid out. I mean, their tour was nice. I mean, they paid big bucks for it, but I mean, they had 4-star hotels, buses to every location. My group, we were just soldiers on a budget. We would actually hike 2 miles to the next spot. It was kind of funny, but they were young. They could do it, and they really got to appreciate it. Because some of them we would actually do in the winter, so they could kind of feel a little bit of the effects of what winter took kind of. The idea of the big picture is important, even with when you flip over into spirituality and the church in general. A lot of parishes, churches of any size, usually are just focused on what's going on around them, their communities, which they should be. They really should be focused on their communities. But sometimes they don't know, hey, what's going on bigger? And I'm not just talking about the U.S., I'm talking about the world. Now, before we get into talking about some of the big picture and how it affects the church here, we do have to address the scripture passage for today, the gospel and the Zechariah reading. It's one of those doom and gloom ones again, right? The apocalyptic. And in this case, in the gospel, we do have the Son of Man returning. And as we go into Advent is a time of preparation. And we're talking hope this week of, hey, our Savior's coming. Now, in this case, this is the Advent. He's not coming as the King, but he's coming as the incarnated Christ on the earth. There's hope there. So we do have the coming of Christ and the idea of preparing for Christ's coming into the world, whether it be as an infant or as the King. So we have to remember that. But it paints a picture. Again, the world as it's painting, it's like, wow, I hope I'm not alive during that time. It's like, it's some pretty rough stuff. I mean, Zechariah is breaking it down. I mean, it's mass chaos everywhere. There's sirens everywhere. There's fires. There's people dying. It's mass chaos. And even in the gospel today, there is a sense of foreboding, doom upon the earth. One thing you got to remember is when you do look at passages like this and how they speak to us is you can really, if you want, kind of apply that to any time during history. Has there ever been a time in history where there hasn't been chaos on the earth or something bad? I mean, there's always been famine, people starving, people poor, people hurting, crying out for God, right? There's always been that in the world. We live in a sinful world. Now, it's a wonderful world created by God because when God created it, he said it was good. But, humanity in our sinful nature, we create this backdrop of doom. A sinful world is going to be doomed regardless. And thank God, he sent Jesus Christ. Again, our Advent message is coming as a measure of hope to be, yes, there will be peace in the midst of all this doom when Christ arrives, both in Advent and in the future. That's all I can say. So, yes, you can apply to any time period this doom concept. So, big picture. What's going on in the world? Well, I would say if you looked out there, I mean, I know there's wars probably on every continent except for ours, but then again, you have weird social stuff going on in our country. So you could kind of say there's a war of ideas, right? That brings up society in general. Society has become more and more over the years. And this is funny. This is after, as you know, when communism fell, the big enemy. Have you noticed how society's kind of taken its place as, I think in a way, the bad guy? Society is really against Christianity now. It used to be where everybody would consider us, even an atheist would say, yeah, for the most part, the U.S. is a Christian nation. Now it's like, I wonder. I know there's Christians that live here, right? But our society, if you look at it, certainly doesn't shine forth the witness of Christ in any way, shape, or form. So big picture, if you really think about it, wow, it really is kind of doomy out there. It really is kind of a chaotic sense of maybe we need to cry out to God. Lord, help us. Lord, reach down and help us. This affects directly us in the church, even though we're a small parish in Prescott Valley, Prescott, which is actually a nice community, and I don't see a lot of doom here, but thank the Lord. But it does affect us because a lot of things are changing in the church worldwide. Do you know that the ACNA was born out of a missionary movement? It was. You know where it was from? In Africa. The churches in Nigeria sent missionaries to the United States. Now go figure that. That blows me away. Because we've always prided ourselves in we're Americans, we're Christians, we're sending out missions to all reaches of the world. Oh, look what just happened. We've received missionaries and thus the birth of the ACNA from overseas. Wow. That really makes you think, okay, so I can see how this is affecting us. The focus of the church is changing from the nice white picket fence, Cold War, American dream mentality where, Sunday is just another beautiful day. You go to church. And it was still a community, so don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, but back then, that was the community thing you did. You went, it was your social gathering. Everything was good. Pastor gave a good sermon or a snoozer, but that's okay. We had fun at church. We got fed with the word. Oh, it's great. It's our safe space. Nobody's bugging us. Wow. Look at society now. They actually frown upon that. We actually get ridiculed because, you guys are just a bunch of sleepers. You're not doing anything. The focus of the church is changing kind of back to where it was. It's a big picture. Back in the early days, the early church. The term they're using is missional, which means basically we can't just sit here and wait for people to come to us. Now we have to go out and go to them, basically. Yeah, we have to engage people, because they're caught up in society. And to them, society is great, but it's leading them to hell pretty quick. So now we have to go back out. Which brings, I don't know what that's going to look like yet. Clergy's talking. We're talking with bishops. Bishops are getting together. This is a new focus. We got to get this down. We got to figure this out. Now my military mind's already, in a sense, I'm already thinking, all right, D-Day invasion type stuff, I've got operators out in all different communities, just on the ground, moving Christ through, the gospel through the community. So that's kind of how I'm thinking. I don't know if it's going to be that way. What I do know is, for example, from what I experienced, a big picture from my time in Iraq was I just remember being on a base ministering to soldiers. Patrols would go out every day, come back. Sometimes there'd be bad things happen. Sometimes good things happen. That was my world. But as I looked at the bigger picture of what was going on, when we had finished the invasion of Iraq, we all of our forces, we made a mistake. We all kind of fell back in on these bases, right? So imagine, if you will, city of Baghdad just filled American soldiers everywhere because the units are there. That's where they ended when the hostilities ended. Okay, hostilities ended. Let's go make a base here, here, and here. So everybody shrunk back to the bases. Kind of like, in the Cold War churches. Everybody shrunk to the churches, right? Well, we had a problem. After the invasion, we had this insurgency, which boggled our minds. We're like, what's going on? We freed these people, right? What's going on? It took a little while, and a general, I don't know which general it was, but someone came up with the idea, maybe we should go back out. Maybe we should go back out. And that's when the surge happened. And instead of having the big base and sending patrols out every day, they sent everybody just out to live again in the communities and be seen every day one-on-one with the people they were helping. Because a lot of our patrols were taking food and clothes and, fixing their infrastructure. But they would just go out, before just go out and come back. Now we were actually back out. And by 2007, everything was fixed. And I'm thinking big picture, wow, what a witness, especially if I'm thinking of a Christian theory of ministry. What we need to remember today is that big picture, God is still working in this world. He really is. Just because we are changing our strategy for the Great Commission, we know God's still working in this world. There are still people out there needing God. And they're still Christians. And I do default to the non-believers. I understand that. I also have to mention that there are Christians in our group that are out there hurting. They may go to the heights for all I know. It's a big church, but they're still hurting. They still need a touch from God as well. I think something to take away from this as an application is to remember the big picture, that God is still working, and that as we go into Advent here, with this Sunday, we got to remember it's hope. It's about hope. The thing that we can take to people around us in any situation, whether they're saved, whether they're, backslidden Christian or on fire Christian, is the fact that God loves them on a daily basis. And God is willing to be a part of their lives if they just open their hearts and accept Him, the Christians as well as non-Christians. So I want us to remember that concept as we go into Advent here. This first concept of hope that Jesus said in His Word, He's coming back. And in Advent, we're obviously focusing on just kind of the historical, His first coming, and the incarnation of Christ. And as we will see as Christmas comes, the incarnation and the coming of Christ to this world basically changed the world. And we'll get more into that as we go each Sunday here, because there's a lot of cool details you guys are going to love. And I hope we'll be able to take that in, put a good application in our lives as we encounter people.